Good news, bad news. I like to sum up the main theme of my book, The True Afterlife Story Bedeviled, in this way. The good news is there really is an afterlife and you really do go on as yourself. The bad news is there really is an afterlife and you really do go on as yourself. Once I knew the true story of my marriage and Tom's life, so many baffling things he'd said and done were suddenly all too clear. I remembered so well when he finally got sick and we had to go to chemo sessions together, how the only time he smiled was when his best friend came to see him. He never smiled like that to see me. I was hurt, but couldn't really explain it. Now that I know the emotional landscape of how Tom viewed his life and who he thought he was, and I was, I know why he had no smiles for me. In his view of our life, taking care of him was something I owed him, because he'd sacrificed his chance at success in order to stay married to me. He never said he was sorry to be leaving us when he became sick with a very lethal cancer. He never apologized for smoking himself to death. He never seemed to care at all that he was leaving us forever, that he would never see our grandchildren or grow old with me. I recall when we first went to Sloan Kettering and a team of doctors surrounded us in an examining room. They asked Tom how he felt. He replied with his usual offhand charm, "I feel so important." Strange words from a dying man. Tom, the real Tom, whoever that was, buried in his subconscious, never fully released into this world, into this smoky timeline of confusing life, this frightened little child had to be dying to feel important. To have witnessed and be a party to such a profound tragedy is why I write these things and promote my book. But to continue with the story, the Tom who died a man who believed something like this: I am a man who was meant for great things, but I was compelled to marry a woman and sort of went along with it because she was helpful and it seemed like the right thing to do. In the end, she was a burden I couldn't get rid of. If only I'd been free, I could have been somebody. You know, like Marlon Brando on the waterfront. Tom went into the afterlife still as himself, only to discover that due to his psychological problems, he'd actually missed the good life he could have had and done horrible things to the people who loved him. I don't say the people he loved because, sadly, I don't think his broken consciousness could manage to love his family. He did love his friend Steve, who was a very good person with a good heart. Tom's earthly conscience, developed and nurtured by his life experiences, told him that he was a noble man who lived by a code. He'd stayed with a woman he didn't love because he was too good, too unselfish, to desert her for fame and fortune. That was his story. That's the clear and happy conscience he had. The true story was almost the total opposite. He'd married a woman he didn't love for his own convenience. That would be me, his wife. That wife had supported him all his life financially and emotionally. She loved him and encouraged him and gave him a child and total loyalty, and made the enormous mistake of believing he'd been honest with her and honored his wedding vows. Of course, he never honored his wedding vows, in word or thought. He went along with the marriage gag while he tirelessly pursued other women. I believe he skated past the wedding vows deal because we hadn't been married by a priest. So, to Catholic Tom, he could do as he liked, since in the eyes of the church and God he was not actually married. In fact, that made him a double martyr, pretending to obey marriage vows even when they weren't real in the eyes of God and the church. God got him in the end, though, when a Catholic nun came into Tom's hospital room and had us renew our wedding vows just before Tom died. It's the bad side of me that makes me laugh at this final ironic touch. But I suppose to Tom, who retained his need for Catholic ritual all his life, it actually finally bound him to me. What a shock it must have been for Tom to reach the other side and begin to face the truth of who he really was and what he'd really done. I do hope he was able to ultimately forgive himself, because his mind had been fatally compromised by his abused childhood. So, ever since I've been in therapy, I have learned not to trust my conscience unreservedly. Your conscience has all kinds of reasons for telling you lies about what you're doing. But I now know for sure what I had always felt as a result of growing up with my two narcissist parents. A lot of people do awful things to you and to others, fully believing that because it makes them feel good, they are helping you and doing good, and completely unaware of the harm they are causing. People with mental difficulties and confusions never have a very clear idea of who they are or their effects on the people around them. Often they are so consumed with their own problems, they don't perceive what they are doing to others or what the situation actually is. Hence, I am in total agreement with the great philosopher king Jordan Peterson when he contends that humans are storytelling creatures. We all have what we believe to be our stories, and further, I believe that our lives and experiences need to be interpreted as nearly as possible to their emotional truth and reality, because in the afterlife we will face not our possibly compromised human conscience, but our actual soul. It seems to me that our souls are pure love, and that in our lives we usually darken that beacon of love in many ways, because humans are kind of crude in our understanding of ourselves and our life. Life pummels us with a lot of mixed messages that can really screw up your life and afterlife. I see our souls in the afterlife, and probably in this life too, as the ultimate truthometer. This truthometer is celestially sensitive to every nuance of our emotional lives and its impact on the emotional lives of those around us. It's my experience and also the result of my research into NDEs that our souls and God are pure love and kindness. I do think you can destroy your soul so thoroughly that it is already ashes ready to heap on the fires of hell by the time you die. But I also believe the mustard seed parable, that if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you have enough kindness in your heart to redeem your soul. As a theater and arts lover, I believe that culture is one of the most important creations of human beings to help us see and understand not only who we really are, but what is actually going on in other people's minds and what they are really trying to do, not just what they say they are. I'll talk more about the transcendental sublimity of theater in later podcasts. But, as I now know, Tom ended up in hell for a while by his own choosing. I write a long chapter about that in the book Bedeviled, and frankly I still don't completely understand it. But it has helped me to pity him and to see that he was a drowning man in life. As he once told me through psychic Pam Coronado, I was his life jacket. Trying to be objective about the man I both love and hate, I had only half of Tom, but in all honesty I have to admit that half of Tom is about twice as much as a lot of other people, at least to me. What I can't seem to get over is the secret contempt he felt for me. I have no pictures of him up anywhere. I think knowing that his secret contempt is lurking behind his smiles is part of the reason I can't look at him. The other part is how sad it makes me to look at him and know how tragic his life was. But all these things are why I love the arts. They reflect our thoughts, perceptions, and feelings back at us and teach us. Here's what Václav Havel, the famous dissident playwright president of the Czech Republic, jailed by the Soviets when they put an end to the Prague Spring, has to say about the importance of culture to society. Quote, "The main instrument of society's self-knowledge is its culture. It is culture that enables a society to enlarge its liberty and to discover truth." End quote. And here's the beginning of the next quote, which I paraphrased. "Liberal censored culture is careful, quote, not to excite people with the truth, but to reassure them with lies. The aesthetics of banality." End quote. This is the reason I avoid all New York Times bestseller books, everything Amazon pushes me to read, watch, or buy in the area of opinion. They never excite me with the truth, but only try to reassure me with lies. Their ruling principle is the aesthetics of banality, and I'm not here in this tragic world to sit on my behind and wallow in the mediocre. I am here to live, and I think you are too. And don't forget, the good news is there really is an afterlife, and you really do go on as yourself. The bad news is there really is an afterlife, and you really do go on as yourself. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll keep coming back. Thank you so much.